The air over Verdun hangs heavily with the stench of war. Germany, undeterred by Entente offensives in 1916, aims to bleed France white. The French, steeled in resolve, stand ready to defend every inch of the River Meuse. With each explosion that rips through the sky, with each life snuffed out in the cold mud, their tenuous grip on hope tightens. German forces press in from three sides, and the men at Verdun prepare for a harrowing saga of valor and horror amidst the grim realities of war. Situated about 250 kilometers northeast of Paris, Verdun has always held a revered place in French history and sentiment. Its grounds have repeatedly bore witness to historic events, such as the Treaty of Verdun that marked the division of the Frankish Empire, its endurance during the Franco-Prussian War against Prussian besiegers, and its resilience against German encirclement during the First Battle of the Marne in 1914. At the core of Verdun's defense lay the Fortified Region of Verdun, or RFV, an intricate network of fortresses encircling the town. This network boasted over 20 major forts, flanked by numerous smaller fortifications, all constructed between 1870 and 1913. Among these, Forts Douaumont, Vaux, and Souville were the most formidable, with Douaumont being the largest and newest, having been completed just 3 years prior to the battle. These forts were marvels of military engineering, their steel and concrete foundations buried under layers of earth, offering both camouflage and a degree of protection against artillery shelling. As 1915 gave way to 1916, the front lines had wrapped around Verdun from three sides, choking off all but one supply route, 50 kilometers to the southwest. This lifeline, christened the Sacred Way, became the conduit for hundreds of thousands of soldiers and a torrent of ammunition, offering a flicker of respite to the beleaguered defenders. Verdun held immense strategic importance for both France and Germany. For the French, it was a symbol of national determination, its fortifications guarding the pathway to Paris. For the Germans, capturing Verdun would not only demoralize the French army, but also potentially force France to seek an armistice. Moreover, its seizure would provide a tactical advantage, offering a stronghold on the Western Front. The First World War was one of the most destructive conflicts in human history, upending the social order and leaving millions of people dead, wounded, and displaced from their homes. One of the most interesting stories from the aftermath of the war is that of the Czechoslovak Legion. Thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Last Train Home by THQ Nordic, you can relive this unit's remarkable journey from the horrors of the Eastern Front through the brutal, Civil War-ravaged countryside of Russia as they attempt to make their way back to their newly independent homeland via the long and dangerous Trans-Siberian Railway. Last Train Home is an RTS game that combines the real-time tactical combat experience of Company of Heroes with the resource management and strategic decision-making of a game like Frostpunk. Deploy your squad, complete diverse objectives in a series of real-time missions while you level up your men and discover their individual stories by unlocking new skills, gathering better equipment, assigning medals, and helping them rise through the ranks. Direct your men in their non-combat roles on board the train and unlock its full potential by upgrading the carriages and locomotive, and oversee important maintenance work to keep it running. Choose your tactics wisely and use every skill to safeguard the lives of your soldiers and complete your mission. Support our channel today by clicking our link in the description below. Download Last Train Home and experience firsthand the compelling narrative of the Czechoslovak Legion's valiant fight on behalf of the Entente powers during the First World War and their long journey home. Overall, the onset of 1916 seemed to herald a tide of optimism for the Central Powers. In the east, their forces had carved deep into Russian territory during the Gorlice-Tarnów offensive. To the west, Germany held its ground against the Entente in Belgium and the Champagne region of France. The Entente's failed offensive near Verdun in the previous autumn further buoyed German morale. Meanwhile, their alliance with Bulgaria had tightened the noose around Serbia, and although Italy had joined the Entente, their efforts were mired in the Isonzo Valley, offering little more than a distraction. Despite Verdun's strategic and symbolic significance, trouble was on the way. A lack of appreciation by French leadership, especially Chief of Staff Joseph Joffre, meant that the RFV was undermanned and under-equipped. In 1915, Verdun's fortifications had already seen a reduction of over 237 guns and a substantial amount of ammunition, leaving only its heavy turret guns. Despite the onset of trench constructions, progress slowed due to resource diversion to the Second Battle of Champagne. By February 1916, Fort Douaumont, the largest in the region, was scarcely armed and was used mainly as a barracks. In General Joffre's eyes, the forts of Verdun were outdated and not likely to stand up to the firepower of German artillery. Instead, he wanted to allocate manpower and materiel on more easily defensible positions across other theaters of the Western Front. It wasn't until political pressure mounted that Joffre ordered reinforcements to Verdun on January 23rd. The architect of the German assault was their Chief of General Staff, Erich von Falkenhayn, who was driven by a complicated mix of motivations. Despite these Central Powers advancing well on the war front, Falkenhayn found himself ensnared in a labyrinth of political and economic dilemmas that his rivals in the German court were keenly aware of. One of these, while victories burgeoned in the East, Falkenhayn deemed them hollow in the grand scheme of ending the war West, a sentiment echoed in his phrase, "The East gives nothing back." To Falkenhayn, it was Britain that was Germany's formidable adversary. Yet a direct confrontation was deemed futile given Britain's naval prowess, geographical insulation, and robust resupply channels. Falkenhayn believed that severing the Anglo-French alliance could disillusion Britain and expedite the end of the war. He surmised, as the commander of the Fifth Army at Verdun days. When February 21st finally came, the skies above Verdun roared with German artillery. Over 1 million shells rained down in a relentless 10-hour bombardment on French positions, probing assaults on villages north of the RFV, methodically edging along the right bank of the Meuse. The major push commenced on February 24th. A grave oversight had left Fort Douaumont thinly manned. Its capture on the 20th of Verdun's defenses. It was a charge he accepted, a re-garrisoning of the RFV's remaining forts, bolstering them with additional troops and essential supplies. This strategic move was vital in shoring up. While the German offensive on the right bank was swift and decisive, the left bank posed a greater problem. The difficult terrain of the left bank made the advances challenging, and its forces managed to seize 2 villages in the left bank. Their focus then shifted to the elevated German advances toward Côte 304 and the Dead Man's Hill, as well as disrupting the German rear lines. The toll of the battle began to mount with each passing day. The casualty numbers on both sides climbed steeply, by heralding the protracted and bloody struggle that lay ahead. The control of these 2 hills seesawed between the French and the Germans throughout March, and they became the initial state. General Joffre grew increasingly discontented with Pétain's resolute focus on defense. In a bid to shift the strategy, Joffre aimed to replace Pétain with a commander who elected Robert Nivelle as the new commander of the Second Army, a move designed to distance Pétain, culminating in an ambitious attack on May 22nd. Preceding the assault, between May 17th, the 9th Regiment made a gallant advance, breaching the fort and occupying its western half. However, their triumph was fleeting. German reinforcements swooped in, isolating the 129th Regiment and compelling a French retreat. But the saga of resilience continued at Fort Vaux. Commander resorted to carrier pigeons for communication. On June 4th, amidst a dire supply shortage, he dispatched his last pigeon to Verdun Citadel, earning the Legion of the Honor and the moniker The Brave. 12 gallons of drinkable water left for 600 men, Major Renaud had no choice but to surrender. In a rare gesture of chivalry amidst the savage conflict, Crown Prince Wilhelm honored Renaud with a gifted. The relentless onslaught at Verdun was momentarily eased as July ushered in the Battle of the Somme, requiring the redeployment of troops along different front lines. By the end of August, Romania's declaration of war against the Central Powers opened up a new front, intensifying the already complex European conflict. This was followed by a significant military reshuffle on August 29th, when Falkenhayn, weighed down by the quagmire at Verdun, was replaced by Paul von Hindenburg as the chief of the German General Staff. Hindenburg, with a fresh perspective, shifted focus to other theaters of war as he recognized the diminishing returns of the Verdun campaign. He promptly ordered a halt to all offensive operations in the RFV, marking a tactical reevaluation. Hindenburg's strategic pivot aimed to better allocate Germany's military resources, seeking more favorable battlefields to change the war's trajectory, which had been largely stagnant and draining. Meanwhile, the French remained poised to reclaim the territory lost under Falkenhayn's leadership. In late October, a determined French assault began, with more than 700 guns pounding Fort Douaumont into submission. Within a week, thousands of shells had rained down, rendering the fort's defenses nearly derelict. Nivelle's novel creeping barrage tactics, where artillery fire barely precedes a steady infantry advance, ensured the German defenses stood no chance. By the time French troops stormed the fort on the 24th, the Germans were already staging an evacuation, leaving only a skeleton force who yearned for reinforcements that would never arrive. By the end of that day, the French had captured over 6,000 prisoners and 15 artillery pieces. The tale was not different at Fort Vaux. Following devastating bombardments by French artillery, the Germans were forced to evacuate after a French shell caused a huge explosion. The French reasserted control over the fort shortly after, allowing for a moment of symbolic recuperation among the long-drawn bloodshed. On December 14th, leadership within the French army shifted from Joffre to Nivelle, marking a new phase. This change came just before the second offensive at Verdun, orchestrated by Generals Pétain, Nivelle, and commanded by General Charles Mangin. On the morning of December 15th, the calm was broken by the roar of guns signaling the French advance. The preceding six-day bombardment, involving 827 guns and a total of 1,169,000 shells, had turned the battlefield into a pockmarked crater. Artillery observation aircraft directed the final bombardment onto German positions, preparing the ground for infantry assault. At 10 a.m., the French infantry moved forward, shielded by a double creeping barrage of shrapnel and high explosive fire. The barrage was designed to keep German defenders at bay while French troops advanced. The attack was effective. German defensive lines collapsed, with many soldiers captured. The rapid pace of their advance left German reserve units scrambling to respond. By the night, Verdun, claiming vital observation points, boosting the morale of the French forces as they pressed further east. Both sides also perished. Although Verdun did not witness the gravest loss, it 18th, nearly 10 months in total. Or the Malmedy Massacre. New Armchair Historian exclusives are out every month, and other historical creators are making